Hello and welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm JC Bybee and this is my writing advice channel. Come here for lectures on, or rants, on world building, organization, characterization, plot, plot arcs, how to do good plot arcs, hopefully. Um, I am an indie author. I have 8 books out there, and you can get all of my books through my website, which hopefully I will have linked in the description, provided I don't forget. Today's lecture, or discussion, I guess, topic, there we go, is world building. I will be doing, this is a 2-part lecture. This is one I've given at writers' conferences previously. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, world building. What is world building? It is the process of creating whatever setting or world or idea that you want to tell your story in. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have to understand where your story's going in order to tell it, not necessarily properly, but coherently, and following a pattern and making sure you're being consistent with what you say in your book. If it goes to the next slide, there we go. What's your core concept? This is what I view as the foundation of your world building, and your core concept isn't your genre. I have to emphasize that. Fantasy isn't a core concept. Sci-fi is a little bit more of a core concept than fantasy, but it's still not solid enough. So, like I said, sci-fi, fantasy, fairy tale, so on and so forth, doesn't inform enough to create a world. It gives you some scaffolding, maybe, but it doesn't give you what you need to start writing your outline, if you're an outliner, or if you're like me, a discovery writer, to actually start writing and putting ideas to the page. I always tell writers to start off with a what if statement. What if there were superheroes? I have a series called Hero Unit. The idea behind Hero Unit is, what if instead of our superheroes being vigilantes, semi-government employees, sort of operating outside of the law, sort of not operating outside of the law, what if instead they were law enforcement officers? And so hero units are police officers who police superpowered crime. They're the ones that enforce the laws that are specific to, well, I call them exceptionals in my series, the people with superpowers. What if magic was a regular part of life? That's a concept of, oh, I know magic, so I kind of have to hide, is how we often see it, especially in urban fantasy or modern fantasy settings. But what if you just simply said, magic just is, and it's something that people have access to? Some people can use it, some people can't. That gives you a world or an idea that you can build off of, especially if you want to use Earth as your setting. That's a solid place to start with, to take urban fantasy in a different direction. My Telvana Mysteries series is a fantasy series, but the core idea, the core concept was, what if instead of the standard sort of small, medieval, early Renaissance cities that were growing but weren't like our megatropolises that we have, what if instead they were big cities? And what problems would arise in a fantasy setting with big cities? Grant's Crossing, my main city in my first book, is got over 1 million people in it. And it's not just all humans. It's humans, it's elves, it's orcs, it's dwarves, and all of the things that can come about based off of the world's history. We'll talk about history, not today. That's a big topic. But those ideas formed or informed my world building. So when I sat down and started writing, I had an idea of where I wanted to go. So I talked about discovery writers and outliners. Outliners, this is where you start your outline. Discovery writers, you will have to take notes. Get used to it. If you want to make sure that you are keeping your continuity in a good place, you're following what you're trying to do, then you need to take notes. I have another series of videos I'm going to do about how to stay organized. It's geared a little bit more toward discovery writers, but I'm pretty sure outliners will find good information there for them too. But back to world building, as you're doing these things, and even outliners might need to go back and refine their outline when they start writing, because new ideas might come up, or you might not like what you've done or how you've handled a specific idea. So then we get into how much world building is too much. And there's two sides to this topic. The first is, when do I stop world building and when do I start writing? When you get to the point where your world building is impeding your ability to write your book, you need to stop and actually write. Get the outline down, get your 3-act breakdown done, know your characters, and get writing. For you discovery writers, you don't need to draw 6 or 7 maps. You don't need to investigate and research tectonic plate movement ad nauseum. You need to sit down and write. And when you get to a spot where you get hung up, for whatever reason, whether you don't like where your outline is, suddenly don't like where your outline is going, or as a discovery writer, you run into a scene and you don't understand, you don't know where to go, you can look back at your notes and hopefully find an answer, or you can get feedback from fellow writers. That's why writers groups are important. I forgot to mention this in the intro, but I'm part of a writers group. We call ourselves Third Person POV. We have a podcast that's here on YouTube and other podcasting platforms, where if you're curious about how to do a writers group, we record what we do. It's all unscripted. It's all chaotic. So if you want to see what a writers group can look like, again, it will be different, group to group, people to people. People are individuals. But if you're getting stuck and your world building doesn't feel like enough, maybe you're just missing something that you've written already, or a question that you don't have answered quite right. Your writers group can help you find that out. But you can't do any of that until you're actually putting words to a page. And the world building only goes far enough to get you writing. And then on the other side of it, how much world building within the writing is too much? You don't want page-long descriptions of a building, of a carriage, of a spaceship. Well, maybe a spaceship. You might be able to get away with that, but probably not. So how much also depends. This is where your genre comes in. Fantasy readers expect more world building in general. Not always, but in general, fantasy readers, they're in it for those kind of details. They like the depth that fantasy gives and fantasy writers can bring. Now, how you deliver that, we'll talk about in the next video. But you want to make sure that you have a consistent narrative and a consistent idea of what information is important to build your world in your reader's eyes, especially in fantasy, if you are not using Earth as your base. If you've created your own world, you need to understand, like if you mention an animal that you've made up and give it a weird name, your readers have no concept for that until you give them a description. And that description doesn't necessarily need to be a block of text. It can be observations made by your main characters or what have you. The same with sci-fi. If you're going to be doing alien encounters in science fiction, you need to make sure you understand what the aliens look like, but also give ways to describe them without just, here's 5 lines of text that gives you a boring description of what this alien looks like or what this spaceship looks like. You want to make sure that it's engaging, that it brings your reader along in the plot, and that it serves the story you're trying to tell in a way that feels natural. In my writers group, we talk often about how Tyler, one of our members, his story is he has a slightly easier time with this because he has his main character is kind of a fish out of water. In other words, he's gone from home, which was a big city, to a very small town that he's never visited before. And so he can use that as a vehicle for world building for his small little town. It works great. For those of us that are writing in the mystery or thriller genres, the world building isn't as important as the other two, but it's not unimportant. To say that it's not important would be completely incorrect. But the world building happens as the mystery, as the plot progresses. It's one where your world building really needs to serve the urgency of the plot. So those are things to consider as you're writing, as you're outlining, as you're getting feedback, as you're looking at other people's work to give feedback, is how is their world building working or not working? Is it drawing you in? Is it kicking you out? Are you using concepts and ideas that don't necessarily fit the setting you're trying to build? These are all questions you need to look at and ideas you need to go through as you're writing. Because I've found that the actual process of putting words to the page helps me understand and refine my ideas far better than sitting there and doing a bunch of research. Now, caveat, that's me. If research informs your writing and it helps you write, do it, but don't do it to the point that you're not writing anymore. That's the real thing. Don't spend so much time doing research that you're not actually putting words to the page. Timers are a great thing, especially for those of us that get sucked down research rabbit holes. If you know you need to research, set yourself a timer. When that timer goes off, stop. Just as a piece of advice. So that's it for this video. I'm going to keep these kind of short. Nobody wants to sit here and listen to me on YouTube for an hour and a half. Next video, we'll talk more about world building and how you can show it without using these big blocks of text and details that you can add in that help build the world and help inform your reader of what your world wants to look like. So, I thank you for listening. I hope this has been informative. I hope you've learned something. Please, like they say, like, share, subscribe, comment, what have you. Let people know that I'm here. Also, you can find my books on my website, jcbybee.com. I'll link it down below. Go listen to our podcast, Third Person POV Pod, on YouTube, Spotify, other platforms. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.